Welcome to Unit 2 of OnlinePHPClass.com, and in this unit we'll be talking about PHP basics. So first I want to talk about why PHP. So with PHP you can create web applications or command line scripts. They can be interactive and they can eliminate repetitive tasks. You can also enhance existing web applications, be that a simple website or an entire application. I'm sure you've seen web applications or you've used them yourself. Even things as complex as Java-driven applications that a lot of online banking websites do, you can create a smaller scale version of it with PHP. You can even create a bigger scale version of it. It's just PHP does fall under the open source standards. So it is very powerful, it is very flexible, and it is free. So what is PHP? PHP originally stood for Personal Home Page. Okay, now what it stands for is PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. That sometimes confuses people because it's what we call a recursive acronym. The first letter in PHP actually stands for the acronym itself. Some people thought it stood for Hypertext Preprocessor and that the pre was the first P, but that even made it even more confusing. But anyway, it's very simple. You can call it whatever you want, really. Most of the time, you don't really hear what it stands for, you just hear the concept of PHP. A resource that you can use to get PHP content, as well as one that we'll pull from selectively throughout the program, is called php.net. You can access that in your web browser. That is pretty much the entire language. In fact, it is the entire language, and it's a great resource. It's like the go-to resource for looking up functions, to getting syntax, to getting to find out what versions of PHP a certain function was in, versus, when what function it was not enabled. So sometimes what will happen is people might have a program or a web application and they run it and it has PHP code and it says, and it errors out and says call to undefined function such and such. Well, a lot of times the fact that the function doesn't exist, it's not because the programmer didn't code it. It's probably because when you're developing, it could be because you didn't actually develop it. But when you're relying on a PHP-driven function, it's possible that that function doesn't exist in the version of PHP you're running. So you'll get the error call to undefined function. The main config file, as we saw in the installation video, is php.ini. And as you also saw in the PHP introduction video when I was testing, you use open tags and close tags of less than question mark PHP. Then you put your code in where that ellipsis, the three dots are, and then you close it with question mark greater than. Okay, we're going to in this slideshow here, we're going to talk about turning on short open tag, which is a parameter in PHP that will let you get by with using an open tag of just less than question mark, and it will also let you get by with using a short form of the echo tag of less than question mark equals, which is very helpful. So we'll talk about doing that. PHP is whitespace independent. It doesn't care if you put 1,000 spaces before your next keyword or something. It doesn't really care. The only time it's not whitespace independent is for headers, because when we talk about headers and sessions and cookies, whatever you're sending to the browser, if you're sending a blank space, that forces the headers to be sent. So the way the web works basically at a very, very high level, I mean extremely high level, and only one portion of it is when you're having a web page get sent to the user, the headers that come along with that web page get sent whenever the first set of data goes with it. So PHP is not PHP. Actually, I wrote this here in a slideshow, but in reality, the white space that would get sent that would force a header is actually outside your PHP code. We'll talk about that in a much later section, but basically if you're aware of the concepts of PHP and headers, I just want you to know it's white space independent from a coding perspective. For comments, you can use 2 forward slashes. You can also use a / asterisk and then put a asterisk / at the end of a comment block. You'll see variations of that. PHP can be declarative or object-oriented. So object-oriented was added in version 3 of PHP, improved in version 4, and completely rewritten pretty much in version 5. We're only going to talk about declarative PHP in this course because it's easier. In order to teach object-oriented PHP, I'd have to talk about the entire object model, and although that's a really cool topic, it's not for a basic to advanced course. It's more from a advanced to really advanced course. And if you're interested in something like that, feel free to write about it on the forum, and perhaps I'll develop some additional slides that go along with being a member of this course. The variables in PHP don't need to be declared. Okay, that's important if you're familiar with Java or Visual Basic or any type of language where variables need to be declared, C++. They don't need to be declared in PHP. You can just throw a $ in front of them and pretty much use them. There are reserved ones, of course. We'll get to that when we talk about the variables section. Sanitizing the variables is important. Sanitizing is basically how do you make sure that what you're getting from the user is valid and is not going to harm any aspect of your code down the line. We'll talk about that. Dynamic variables do exist, and we'll cover that a little later. Dynamic variables are how do you make a variable of a variable name of something else. So basically, let's say I had, take an example of, say your name is Jim and your last name is Smith. Okay, I can actually have a variable called Jim equal to Smith, and I can iterate through an array of first names like Jim and John and Dan and Matt, and I can have the last names come up and store them into variables of those names. So dynamic variables are pretty cool. You wouldn't necessarily use them in that case, but there are times where they do become really, really important. Statements end in a semicolon, so it's important to know what constitutes a statement. We'll talk about that as we go through each of the structures. Just keep in mind, though, for the most part, you're going to put a semicolon at the end of a statement. Actually, you're always going to put a semicolon at the end of a statement. It's just like I wrote. It depends on what constitutes a statement. So we'll talk about that when we get to control structures and stuff like that. Braces group things. They are sometimes optional. Braces are sometimes called Hitchcocks. They're what are traditionally on the top of the bracket, left and right bracket keys on a traditional keyboard. So they group things. They are sometimes optional. And one thing I also find that's helpful to toss in here is periods concatenate. If you're familiar with Java, where plus signs tend to concatenate and that kind of thing, or you have concatenation functions or that kind of jazz, in PHP, periods concatenate strings. So here's the open and close tag, as we talked about before, less than question mark PHP, and then ending with question mark greater than. You also have the short open tag, less than question mark, and then question mark greater than. The short open tag must be set to true in PHP any. We're going to do that because I don't think it comes that way in the XAMPP delivered PHP. And actually, on this slide, I want to also mention that you can wrap HTML around PHP code. So you can open and close PHP code, put HTML before and after. You can even do the same thing with loops. Perhaps when we get to loops, we'll talk about that, where you can literally have a for loop and open up your for loop, close your PHP tag, have HTML in there that gets repeated with the for loop, open up your PHP tag, and actually close your for loop. So we can talk about that when we get to the for loop section. If I don't happen to cover it when we get there, feel free to post on the forum and we'll talk about it. So we're actually going to get into the echo language construct. Before I do that, while I remember, I don't know if I have a slide on it, I want to just hop over to XAMPP to see if we can set the PHP any for short open tag. Alright, so I had dev PHP open, so I just alt tab to it, and I'm going to go up to options and hit edit PHP any, and what we'll do is we'll find short open tag, default value on, development value off, production value off. Okay, default value is on, so that's interesting that it, okay, F3. Oh, it says default value is on for PHP, but yet the XAMPP installation of PHP actually turns it off. Um, I don't know why it would do that. But anyway, so it is set to off. We're going to have to turn this on. So just change this to on. And then Control S, I'm going to push, which saves it. So that little red thing at the top, I'll hit space here so you can see it. This little red thing up here tells you that there's unsaved changes. So I'm just going to do that, save it, it goes away. Also the save icon at the top, not to be confused with the save as. So you have save and save as. So save also pops up. See, if you have some uncommitted changes, so to speak. Okay, so I saved that. So now we're good. I'll close PHP any, and we'll get back to the slideshow. All right, so the echo language construct. Echo is I used it right in the demo that I just did where I echoed PHP info. The echo language construct is probably one of the heavier used constructs that you're going to use during your development of PHP. It's how you get something to display on the screen, be it a and I know I told you that PHP also works on a OS low-level script kind of implementation. You can use echo to a shell or something of that nature. In this course, since we're talking about online PHP development, we're specifically talking about the web page. So this is how you echo to a website. Keep in mind that HTML, unless you put it in the echo, does not generate on the page. So if you echo one line and then echo another line, there's no break tag in between. It'll just all show up on one line in your HTML. So you'll have to put a break tag. So that is different if you're familiar with Corn shell programming or Bash programming, where the echo in those shells actually generate a new line character. It's more closer to the print construct in Perl if you're familiar with it. Okay, so you, as I demoed here, so you have multiple examples. First, let's talk about the syntax. Void, the traditional PHP syntax. So we're talking about void here, meaning that echo doesn't return anything. It is a construct. So void, the function name, echo, and it takes a list or slash, it takes a list of strings basically. And a lot of times you can pass it one string and you'll be just fine. You can also do, and so as we'll look at the demos here, so you can pass it one string, echo, this is a PHP script. You can also do the second example, echo this, comma, works also. Just passing it just another string. The third one, echo, you can concatenate with a period. So you have the string you, then you're closing that, you're concatenating it with a period. This becomes helpful when you're dealing with variables. So you can put variables in that way as well. So you can also include, I'm saying, of course, also make sure you include the PHP tags and end your echo statements with a semicolon. As I mentioned briefly earlier, echo has a shortcut syntax. You can use the less than question mark equals construct to automatically open your PHP tag and pretty much create an echo. You don't need the semicolon at this point. It's basically stating that that particular tag is an echo statement. It's very similar to the Java JSP less than percent equal constructs. So, okay, moving on. So the pre-practical, look at that. There's activating short open tags. So I already did that. Activating Apache and MySQL in XAMPP for PMA. We're going to do that. Activating Apache and Dev PHP for preview. We already did that in the installation. And activating short open tag in PHP ini, which we already did. So the only other thing we have left to do is to activate Apache and MySQL in XAMPP for PMA. So basically, just give me 1 minute. I'll pull up the XAMPP control panel. All right, so here's the XAMPP control panel. I want to activate Apache and MySQL. So alright, so click OK to install the MySQL service. I do want to do that. You'll get the same box for Apache, like I mentioned earlier, though I already did the service installation, so that's not going to happen for me. And I'll hit start on the Apache starting. Okay, I don't know if that's going to work, but let's see. There it goes. Apache service started, and I'll hit start on the MySQL. Okay, and that looks. Now, what I'm curious is if I flip open the dev PHP and I go to internal preview. Really? Oops, not internal preview. Browser. I don't want to do that. I'm wondering. Okay. Don't know why. PHP myadmin. Why is it doing that? Okay. Let's see if there's a. Alright, there's a XAMPP web browser on 127.0.0.1. There's a dev PHP web browser on port 8888. So I think there's a PHP myadmin at this point. Yeah, and there is. So that's cool. So we opened MySQL, we started MySQL, and we started Apache. So now we have access to a database that we can mess with. I mean, code with. Alright, so, alright. Then we activate it. So all these three things are complete. If we followed along the slideshow. Alright, so a demo using hello world, echoing hello world using full open tags, echoing hello world with using the short open tag with the embedded echo. Okay, so I will demo that. So basically, you're in your editor here. Just opened up your PHP tag. This is the one with the regular PHP, and just echo hello world. And I can save it. Internal preview. There you go. Okay. To do the short echo, the short tag, just change that PHP to an equal sign. I don't, and you definitely don't need the echo. I'm pretty sure you don't need the semicolon either. Save it. And it doesn't change. In fact, just to make sure it works, I'll say hello world. This is onlinephpclass.com. This way, just to let you know that the tags are working. Okay? So that's that demo. Your exercise is to do the hello world using one method or both. The exercises build and they get pretty complex, so definitely take it. I want to get you familiar with using the PHP constructs. So that's your exercise, and then after your exercise, go ahead and take any questions you have, comments, observations. Go ahead and post them in the forum, and we'll go from there. All right, I will see you in the next unit.